We are now in day 3 of round 3 in the Phoenix Festival tournament. Use the links in the description below to go and vote for who you think would win in each match and give your reasoning as to why. Whether it's due to semblance, weapons, experience advantage, etc. Whatever your choice may be, a reason does have to be given. Now, our first match of the day in the singles category starts off pretty strong with a match between Salem's Inner Circle. We have Cinder Fall versus Tyrian Callows in the Anti-Gravity and Savannah biomes. Now, this would be a fight I would love to see, and if tensions get high enough in Salem's Inner Circle, maybe we will see it at some point. Though it would be very different in the RWBY series versus here, because they would probably be fighting to the death, and also Cinder would be allowed to use her maiden powers in the RWBY series. In this fight, Cinder is not going to be using her maiden powers. She's still very skilled otherwise, using her weapon of Midnight, the bow and arrows that can split into dual blades, and her semblance of Scorching Caress is nothing to scoff at, but against Tyrian Callows, the speed that he has, fighting with the Queen's servants, not to mention his tail on top of that and his semblance of aura disruption, would be a lot to handle. Now, Cinder can charge up her arrows with her Scorching Caress, superheat them so that when they make contact with the ground they cause explosions around opponents wherever they land, but Tyrian, I think, would be quick enough to dodge that, especially considering he was able to catch an arrow out of the air with his teeth back in Volume 7, so yeah, I feel like Tyrian would be able to dodge all of Cinder's ranged attacks and would be able to get close combat fairly easily. Now, Cinder is skilled at close combat using her Midnight, but keeping up with Tyrian while he's using the Queen's servants, his tail, as well as punching and kicking on top of that, as I've said numerous times, Tyrion's 5 points of contact is a lot to keep up with, and I think Tyrian would be able to overwhelm Cinder and take her out in this fight. If she was using the maiden powers, though, that would be a lot different, but in this tournament, Tyrian would take the win, in my opinion. And then moving on to our second fight of the day, another one that I would love to see play out at some point, but this is one we probably never will see play out, as it's Pyrrha Nikos versus Vlevet Scarlatina in the Forest and Geyser biome. Now, Pyrrha, we didn't see how much she would have progressed past Volume 3, unfortunately, because if she had gotten all the training up until Volume 7, she would be one of the most skilled characters that we would see in the RWBY series. But she was still one of the most skilled, or the most skilled character at the student level that we ever saw in the RWBY series. And going up against Vlevet Scarlatina, being one of the most, or the most versatile character, with her weapon of Anisadora, being able to create hard light dust copies of any weapon that she's taken a picture of, and thanks to her semblance of photographic memory, able to replicate the fighting style that coordinates with that weapon perfectly, she is a force to be reckoned with in and of herself. Now, Pyrrha does have her semblance of polarity, but I don't know how much that would be able to affect Velvet, because Velvet's Anisadora, it does probably have some metallic components. I'm pretty sure it would almost have to be able to work the way it does, but even if Pyrrha is able to launch it away or use her polarity to pull it away, then I think Velvet is quick enough to be able to snap it up fairly quickly and not have that affect her too much. But the problem with Velvet's fighting style is there is a slight delay whenever she's switching between hard light dust copies, and I'd imagine there'd be a slight delay switching between fighting styles as well. We did see a fight take place in RWBY Before the Dawn between Vlevet Scarlatina and Nebula Violet, where Velvet was fighting with a weapon she wasn't used to, but still switching between multiple different fighting styles fairly fluidly, keeping up with the pace of battle, etc., so that might not play much of a factor, but the lag between switching between hard light dust copies definitely would, and Pyrrha is easily skilled enough to take advantage of that, and I feel when it comes down to base skill level, Pyrrha just surpasses Velvet, even Velvet being in her 4th year at Shade Academy. Pyrrha is just such a powerhouse and a skilled character in and of herself that I think she would be able to overwhelm Velvet and take her out in this fight. But let me know what your thoughts are on both of these matches in the comments below, as they are quite interesting and I would love to hear your thoughts. But moving on to the third match in the singles category, we have Weinzeki versus Robin Hill in the Desert and Mountain biomes. Now, both of these characters, I would argue, have equal level of skill when it comes to the amount of training that they have, as both of them are graduates of Atlas Academy, Weinzeki being a member of the Aesops. Robin Hill, according to Forrest, that we learned in Volume 7, could have been top-ranking members of the military, but chose instead to stay in Mantle. So I would argue they're on similar skill levels, but when it comes to their actual skill sets, I think Vine has the advantage. We've never seen him use his weapon at all in the RWBY series. Hopefully we'll see that in Volume 8. He mostly relies on his semblance of aura vines, being able to extend physical aura from from his hands and his feet, able to restrain opponents and slam them into the ground, deal damage to opponents that way. Better for restraining opponents, but 1v1 it would still be a pretty useful semblance if the opponent can't dodge out of the way of them. And Robin, she is a fairly quick opponent, but I don't think she is as quick as Vlevet was, as Vlevet did beat Weinzeki, and that was largely attributed to her speed and being able to dodge out of the way, and also having more ranged combat. Robin does have her weapon, which is her winged shield that is also a crossbow, so with the explosive arrows that she has, maybe she would be able to keep it long distance and use the explosive arrows to disrupt Vine's semblance, break his focus, and be able to knock him around a little bit. We saw that explosives were decently effective against him when Team RWBY fought against the Aesop's back in Volume 7, so maybe that would play a factor and Robin would be able to win, but I feel like Vine using his semblance against Robin, who only would really have her weapon in this fight, as her semblance of lie detection wouldn't play a factor, not really a battle-oriented semblance in general, but still I think Vine has the advantage in this fight, and the desert and mountain biomes wouldn't really play too much into that, although it might hinder the mobility of both characters, which would work out in Vine's favor more than anything. So I think Vine would win more often than not, but I could see scenarios where Robin could win as well. Now, moving on to our fourth match, we have Sage Ayana versus Gira Belladonna in the forest and urban biomes. Now, this would pretty much be a straightforward test of strength, and when it came down to that, Sage does have his weapon, the giant greatsword that, when swinging it, would be able to deal a lot more damage and hit a lot harder than just straight up punches or slashes like Gira would be using with his claws, but I think Gira would have the speed advantage over Sage and be able to deal a lot more blows to him, possibly disarming Sage, knocking his blade out of his hands, and just being able to pummel him. I think Gira would take this fight almost 100% of the time, especially considering we haven't really gotten much expansion on how Sage has improved since Volume 3. We did see a bit of him in Before the Dawn, but he had just a few lines here and there. We didn't really get an expansion on his fighting style, or we didn't get his semblance either, so this would be a straight-up brawl, and I think Gira would take him in this fight. And then we move on to our fifth fight, which is Jean Arc versus Yang Xiaolong in the Geyser and Desert biome. This would be a very intense fight, because Yang would have to get close combat to Jean, Jean with his enhanced shield, having the hard light dust around it as well as the gravity dust in it so he could launch opponents backwards. If Yang got close to Jean, he would be able to knock her back, and that would make it very difficult for Yang to actually deal damage against Jean. Now, Yang does have the remote detonation bullets that she has used in Volume 7, part of the upgrades that she got, so she could definitely use that to her advantage, disrupt Jean, and be able to get in and deal quite a few blows against him. And Jean, as of this point, doesn't really have any long-range combat. He still fights with Crocea Moors, his sword and shield, and currently he hasn't mastered extending his aura, which was hinted at in Volume 7, and I really do think Jean is going to be the one to bring back the aura arc, the attack that we saw Crow Bronwyn use in Volume 3 against Winter Schnee, and I think Jean's going to have the most powerful that we have seen, which would be amazing to see, but at this point, Yang just has more versatility and advantage over Jean. The Hard Light Dust and the Gravity Dust upgrades that he got definitely help him in this fight, but I don't think they're enough to give him the win over Yang, and Yang would be able to get around his shield, get over his defenses, and be able to break his aura a lot faster than Jean would be able to break Yang's. Not to mention, if Jean did deal any damage to Yang, if he didn't break her aura immediately, that would only power her up when she used her semblance, and then it would only end the fight quicker for Jean. So Yang just has the advantage in this fight, and I don't see Jean being able to beat her. And then we have our last fight in the singles category, which is Ilya Amatola versus Weiss Schnee in the mountain and ocean biomes. Now, the ocean biome does give a bit of advantage to Ilya, working with her lightning lash, the electricity whip that she has. If she's able to lure Weiss into the ocean biome, then she could electrocute her, similar to how Neptune did to Team Indigo in Volume 3, but beyond that, I don't really see Ilya being able to win. Weiss just has the long-range advantage with the glyphs, and also all of the dust that she uses, being able to fire out fireballs and ice shards and be able to manipulate dust at a distance. Not to mention if she's able to summon, use the freezer burn technique that she displayed in the fight that she had against Marrow in Volume 7. give herself a bit of extra time, a bit of a cloak with the fog, and then summon her Armagigas, or the Queen Lancer, or the Borbatusk even. This would give her a massive advantage over Ilia, and I just don't see a way that Ilia would be able to overtake Weiss, especially with Weiss's training in Volume 7 with the Aesops and Winter Schnee. Weiss just outclasses her by this point. And then we have the doubles match of the day. The winner of this match will move on to the grand finals in the doubles category. And we have Crow Bronwyn and Pyrrha Nikos versus Maria Calavera and Marrow Aemon in the Anti-Gravity and Savannah biome. This fight could go either way, if I'm being honest here, because there's so many different ways that this could play out. When it comes to skill level, I would argue that Maria and Marrow have a bit more training than Crow and Pyrrha. Crow is older than Maria was in her prime, but Maria was a legendary huntress. She never went to the Huntsman Academies, but was still one of the best of the best. Crow currently is one of the best, based his weapon off of Maria's, so I would argue they're on fairly equal skill level, but it'd be interesting to see how Crow would be able to match up against Maria. I'm going to assume they're equal, but Marrow definitely has had more training than Pyrrha, with him being a graduate of Atlas Academy, Pyrrha still being a year 1 student as far as we are concerned in this tournament. So I would argue that Marrow has more training, though Pyrrha, with the amount of skill that she had in Volume 1, could be able to match that, but then there's also the fact of Marrow's stay. That semblance would be tricky. We are assuming that Crow and Pyrrha are knowledgeable about Marrow's semblance and would be able to formulate a plan beforehand and be able to deal with it, so immediately when the fight started, they would branch off and make sure that Marrow wouldn't be able to get both of them in the semblance, and if he does get someone in the semblance, it seems as though whenever he's used it in Volume 7, that he's not really able to move while using it, or move very slightly. We haven't really seen him be able to actually attack opponents. Now his weapon of Fetch would allow him to throw it out beforehand, use his semblance to stop a person's momentum, have the weapon hit them, and then deactivate his semblance to catch his weapon, but that wouldn't really work in this fight, as Crow and Pyrrha, whichever one he's able to stop, the other one would easily be able to take action and, well, either interfere with his semblance or attack him directly while he can't move. And Maria, she is very skilled, would be able to defend Marrow while doing this, but I don't really think that his semblance would do more than just drain his own aura. Because if he's held in place and, let's say, he's restraining Pyrrha, Crow could be handling Maria, and Marrow would just be keeping Pyrrha in place, and his aura would just be draining. His semblance would not really play much of a factor. And similarly, if he restrained Crow, and Pyrrha was able to keep Maria under control, I think Maria would be a bit more skilled than Pyrrha, being a legendary huntress and her semblance of preflexes. If it was Maria versus Pyrrha, I think Maria would eventually come out on top, though Pyrrha would give her a lot of trouble, and still, that would just drain Marrow's aura trying to keep Crow in place if he's not able to attack or move, etc. And Crow would just wait for Marrow's aura to start draining and then be able to attack after that. Now, depending on how this matched up, I could see this going either way, but with the various ways that I think it could go, I think Crow and Pyrrha would win more often than not. It depends on how Marrow used his semblance. If he used it on Crow and was able to restrain him first, and Maria was able to take care of Pyrrha before Marrow had to deactivate his semblance, then it could be 2-on-1, Maria and Marrow versus Crow, and at that point, I would give the advantage to Maria and Marrow. But Crow and Pyrrha would know about Marrow's semblance and be able to use the biomes to their advantage, possibly. The Savannah biome could give them a place to hide in the grass, as Emerald and Mercury did at the beginning of their fight against Koko and Yatsuhashi, and the anti-gravity biome could be used to manipulate things here and there. Maria is just such a tricky opponent to deal with her life and death, and the gravity dust that's in them, being able to toss them around the battlefield, have them come back to her, and things like that. So even with Pyrrha's polarity, being able to toss them out of the way, you know, I think Maria would still win. And there's also one thing that we can't forget. Pyrrha and Maria fought 1v1 in an exhibition match before the Phoenix Festival tournament officially began, and in that fight, Pyrrha came out the victor, even just by a slight margin, with her semblance of polarity and being able to mess with Maria's weapons, even just manipulate them slightly, etc. Her skill would come out on top according to majority vote. So as tricky as Maria is able to maneuver around the battlefield and maneuver her weapons with gravity dust, it seems that Pyrrha would come out the victor in that case. So no matter how it matched up, if Marrow was able to only restrain one person from Crow and Pyrrha, either one of them could match Maria, and it just wouldn't work out that well for Maria and Marrow. So I think Pyrrha and Crow just win more often than not in this match, but let me know your thoughts on this one as well in the comments below. And then we move on to the team matches, where we have Team Ashbury, which is Ilya Amatola, Sienna Khan, Gira, and Kali Belladonna, versus Team Dark. This is Dawn Eos, Ash Umbra, Wraith, and Crimson Stride. These characters created by Raxacory. Links in the description below to all of the Team Dark trailers. Definitely check them out. They are amazing, and I really look forward to learning more about these characters. But against Team Ashbury, I think Team Dark would end up taking this one. With the speed and skill that we have seen from Dawn, Eos, Ash, Umbra, and Wraith, they are very fast fighters. I think they would be able to overwhelm at least Ilya and Kali very quickly in the fight. And yes, this would boost Sienna with her semblance of grudge and increase her own power, but they also, with Team Dark, have Crimson Stride, and his semblance of hardening, being able to lock his aura and tank attacks, would be able to deal with Sienna. He could tank the attacks coming from her and be able to counterattack as well, or at least throw her off her game, and could also match Gira if it ended up going that way. Because Gira is extremely strong, but so is Crimson. Wraith being able to dodge around the battlefield with his twin blades that seem to have wind dust in them, and fights similarly to Ironwood, would definitely be able to dodge around Sienna, at least match her speed, and Ash, also fighting close combat, and with her semblance creating almost a mirror image of herself, would be able to deal with Sienna fairly easily as well, or Ilya or Kali, etc., and Dawn, with her Fuma Shuriken, would definitely be able to deal some heavy damage as well. Separating it out into the different blades could possibly catch Sienna's Cerberus Whip and deal with Gira, be able to dodge out of the way of any attacks that Gira has, because Gira, he is a fast fighter for his size, but I don't think he'd be able to match the speed of either Dawn, Ash, or Wraith. And I think Team Dark just would be able to overcome Team Ashbury. Sienna would be the biggest problem of that team, but if they're able to separate her from the rest of her downed comrades, then her semblance of grudge wouldn't be as powerful as it could be, and I think Team Dark would simply take this fight overall. And then we have the last fight of the day, which is Team Funky versus Team Sun. This would be an interesting fight to see play out, as they are pretty much on equal skill level. Both of them are in the exact same year at their respective academies. Team Funky studying at Atlas Academy. Team Funky consisting of Flint Cole, Neon Cat, Cobalt, and Ivory. And we don't really know anything really about Cobalt and Ivory. We've seen them fight very briefly in Volume 7. And we do know a lot more about Team Sun, consisting of Sun Wukong, Scarlet David, Sage Ayana, and Neptune Vasilius, currently in their 3rd year at Shade Academy. And we got an expansion on Team Sun in Before the Dawn, and we've learned that all of them have grown a bit stronger. Sun is able to control his semblance a little bit better, with being able to create clones of himself and fight alongside them. He already gives Team Sun a numbers advantage against Team Funky. We got a bit of an expansion on Scarlet and Neptune. We discovered Neptune's semblance, and since they are fighting in the ice and lava biomes, I think Neptune would be okay. He does have a fear of water, but his semblance being water attraction, helps him control water. Doesn't really work well with his fear, but being in the ice biome, it's frozen water. I think he'd be okay with that, maybe not exactly sure, so he might stick to the lava biome, and that might, give him some anxiety, but even with that being the case, I think that Team Sun, with the skill that we know that they have, the expansion that they got in Before the Dawn, and when we saw them in Volume 3 in the Vital Festival Tournament, not to mention the training that Sun has had adventuring with Blake, going to Menagerie, fighting against the White Fang, etc., I think their skill level just surpasses what we have seen from Team Funky so far. If we knew what Sage's semblance was, for example, and knew what Cobalt and Ivory's semblances were, then this would be a lot more even of a fight, but just based on the lack of knowledge that we have, I think Team Sun would take this fight overall. So let me know how you guys enjoyed Day 3 of Round 3 in the Phoenix Festival Tournament. Make sure you guys use the links in the description below, go to the Google Forms, and vote for who you think would win. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the tournament overall. Make sure to subscribe, join the Guild of the Eternal Flame, tweet me at PhoenixKnight7, join our Discord server as well, also linked in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.